Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. We're broadcasting from the Appleton Museum of Art in Ocala, Florida. My name's Miss Deborah, and thank you so much for joining us. This week, we're going to meet the masters. We will cover a total of 5 artists. We're not going to talk too much about the artists themselves because we do have a limited amount of time, but if you can, please take some time if you're inspired to go back and learn more about the artists. The first artist that we're going to talk about today is Kusama, and she is an amazing, what they call an installation artist. Her work is highly recognizable because she primarily does dots, lots and lots of dots. So the sample that I made to share with you today of this infinity installation. Now, of course, this is very small. It's like a diorama. When Kusama does her works, they could be the size of huge rooms. Her sculptures are huge and oversized and generally are very, very colorful. Again, if you have some time, Google that and see for yourself. They're amazing. So we will make our own in a smaller scale here using a shoebox or any kind of box that you have. So the materials that we're going to use today, real basic and simple and very open-ended. And in other words, you don't have to use exactly what I have. You can use what inspires you. The first thing is just a shoebox. If you have a lid that's attached to your shoebox, you might want to just take that off. If you're an adult, help you get that off so you have a freestanding diorama. Any kind of box will work. If you have a box, perhaps that Amazon has dropped by, something of this nature, and instead of mounting it in the box like these are, we could just mount it directly on the paper and work flat on the table. So I've collected several just mundane kinds of things, and even a pair of sunglasses. I just thought these were kind of fun, and I'll make it kind of goofy. I did find this old pumpkin shape around, and as silly as that is, Kusama is kind of known for decorating her pumpkins. That's why I used a couple here as well. If you don't have a pumpkin, of course, it's fine. Even if you have a tennis ball or better yet, a ping pong ball. If you don't have a ball, we'll make circles. I also have some colored paper that I'm going to be cutting squares with and then cut circles. You can do this a couple different ways. On this project, I started obviously with an entire yellow base and added black polka dots. The polka dots here are all various sizes. Some of them are even dimensional, like there's some that stick out from the surface. You can do it that way, or this time we're going to start with a white surface and add all different colored dots, all different sizes. So either way that you would like to do it, it's your artwork. Do it the way that you would like. So I have my box here, and I'm going to go ahead and paint through the pieces that we have, and then I'm going to let it dry. So most likely, we're going to come back to this project. That'll give you plenty of time to paint your box, paint your pieces, cut your polka dots. And if you want to find more variety in the elements that you're using, you'll have time to do that. And on your off days, you can always put some paint, either white or a solid another color. I would choose a light color, such as yellow, so that your polka dots show up. The key is that all of your elements and your background are going to be the same color. So let's get started. All right, I have some white paint here And I'm going to use a wider flat brush to paint. I happen to have this. If you don't, any brush will do. This just helps me do it a little bit more quickly. So on this piece, I did paint the entire thing. You don't have to do that. We're interested in the inside of this box. Mine happens to be pretty black with only one thing here, so I'm not even going to worry about the outside. I'm only going to paint the inside of my box. Now I'm trying not to have too many brush strokes, but I'm going to go over it again. Okay, so for right now, this is what it looks like just with one coat on it. And you can see, yeah, it may not look the neatest right now, but when I add another coat, it's going to look great. Okay, let's move on to the sides. So once I get this box painted, then I'm going to go back and paint the elements that I'm going to be adding to my design, all flat white. Everything is going to be white in it until I add my colorful polka dots. And if you don't have a box, that's right. You can just use a plain sheet of paper, gather your elements that you would like to incorporate into your design, and we'll paint those the same color as the base of your piece, of your paper. Okay, so I have one coat that's all ready. And now I'm going to go ahead and start adding paint to the elements that I have here. Now these pieces are all dimensional, so it's going to be a little tricky to paint some of these. This will stand upright. The glasses, I might have to come back and do a couple coats and to add so that it's not getting paint all over. And then I also thought it would be fun to use a set of silverware. I'm going to put them on the wall in the back. That'll look good. So let's start with those. So I'm just going to add, again, this is just a base coat. And as you can see, this part might get just a little messy, because remember here, what we're going for is to achieve an entire backdrop that is all the same base color. I hope you have handy a little something to wipe your hands on, because you might get a little bit of paint on your hands here. But what I was thinking more is if you were, okay, this sounds a little silly, but if you were a little person and you walked into this room, you would be fully immersed. Everywhere you looked, you would see bright yellow and black polka dots. You can either paint all your dots. Now, if you paint all your dots, you are going to become an expert at dot painting. The thing when you paint your dots is when you have a surface that is not just flat, you're going to be able to readily paint that dot on there. That's going to work great. When you have a surface that's nice and flat, you have some additional options that you can do there. You can use dots that already have sticky back on them. You just want to make sure that it is, that it sticks really well to the surface. You might have to add a tad bit of glue if it doesn't. You can always cut these down a little bit too. If you're working on a surface that has some dimension to it and it's not sticking, you can cut it down. Or I have all of these beautiful little pieces of, these were just scrap papers. So I thought these colors looked lovely together. And because I have that white background, I'm going to go for full color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a combination, actually. I'm going to cut some circles, and then I'll probably need to paint some in too, because maybe on this pumpkin surface, maybe even on my sunglasses, I might need to paint a few circles so that it really sticks to the surface. So the first thing, we can circle punches. But that gives you an idea. Or what I think is just the easiest and the best thing to do is to cut your own circles. Now I've cut a lot of circles, so I'm pretty good at cutting circles. And I'm going to give you the real key to doing it. So as you can see, I'm starting with a smaller piece of paper. And I'm even going to fold that into half. So I have a nice square here. And wherever I can have a square, I can make a pretty darn good circle. So instead of starting with a nice big sheet of paper that you end up cutting out of this big sheet of paper, if you have a big sheet, I would cut a strip off so that you end up with smaller pieces. We're not making a big circle. If I was making a big circle, I'd start with a big piece of paper. But if I'm making a small circle, that's what I'm going to start with, a small piece of paper. So I'm going to use this folded in half. And as I come around, I'm sticking pretty close to the edge. I've got a little corner there. Come around, round it off a tad bit. There we go. Not bad. Pretty good circle. Now those might be a little big for my box, but because I'm going to have a variety of circles, I want to have a lot of different sizes. So I'm going to go ahead and use this size in there as well. Oh yeah, that's going to show up great. And what we'll do is we'll just get cutting on a few circles. Then I'm going to go back quick, add a little layer of paint here. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to put this aside so it has a chance to dry. We may not get this finished today, and that's okay. For sure, we'll come back and make sure that we have everything ready so we can glue all of our elements, objects, circles, dots, polka dots, so we can glue it all together. So I'm just going to cut some more dots here quick and get some colors ready. So I'm going to have, the numbers are kind of up to you. I just started with a whole bunch of polka dots when I was working on the example. And hopefully, as you use this smaller piece of paper, starting with a square, you'll find that cutting circles really aren't, it's just really not that difficult with a little bit of practice. Whoa, we've got some nice bright circles here. Let's move this out of the way. There. How about we'll add a little variety here. Now it's pretty amazing that just a bunch of circles, when you start adding all these different colors and when we start adding different sizes, that it's going to look pretty exciting. I'm going to need some extra sizes, some additional sizes. I like the variety of the polka dots. I don't want mine to all be the same size, but I'll do those later. So later, I'll come back and cut additional sizes. But right now, I'll put those aside. Keep all of my dots in a safe place. Polka dots. So I have them all here in my container. So I'll have those ready for later. And I'm just going to add quickly another layer, and we're going to let those thoroughly dry. So it looks like on mine that two coats is probably going to do it, except for maybe the sunglasses. That might need some more because those are kind of tricky. Okay, so I'm going to put my paint away. I'm going to cover it so it doesn't dry out because I'm going to come back to this. I actually have a little bit of water. I'm going to put my brush in here so it doesn't dry out. And then it's going to take me just a second, and I'm going to set this stuff aside. And then y'all can set yours aside, and we will go on to our second featured artist today. Okay, is everybody ready to start a new project? The next artist that we are going to talk about is a pop artist. He takes ordinary things and makes art out of them. His name is Andy Warhol. You probably have seen pieces that are either Andy Warhol prints or inspired by Andy Warhol, and you may have not even realized it. And of course, every time I have tomato soup, I think of Andy Warhol because it's one of his most famous prints, is multiple cans of tomato soup. Okay, you don't get much more ordinary than tomato soup cans. And flowers. One of the examples is here. And this is the one that we have here at the museum. This Warhol is on display here, as well as a Marilyn Monroe. So Andy did a lot of prints. He did other things earlier in his career, but what we know him for is his pop art and his prints. So we're going to make a series of prints. Now, again, we can do this a couple different ways. This one, of course, I chose to use multiple images. It's basically the exact same image, the same background, the same color. We can also use the individual pieces, and I just made note cards out of these. So you can do some smaller pieces as you get more familiar with the printing. Don't throw those away, hang on to them, and we can make some other things out of them too. So talk about ordinary. We are going to start with an ordinary celery stalk. So I took my celery stalk and I've already cut it across the bottom. So here's the bottom of my celery stalk. And when you look at this, you can see that it has a flower image. So we're going to use this to make our print. What we'll actually be making then is called a mono print. We'll be printing one piece at a time. I have different colored papers for the background, and I have a variety of paint colors. So I have my yellow, my primary yellow, red, and blue, and we'll add some green in there too. If you don't have celery, you might look in the refrigerator. There could be some other things that you could use. If you have peppers, I always thought that these flowers, that you could use a pepper and use that to make a print. If you don't have that, if nothing else, you have your hand. You could use your hand, and you have this wonderful little circle action here, and use it to make a print. The point of the print is just so that we could repeat the imagery. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to prepare our paper. So as I said, I have these multicolored pieces of paper, and I don't want to use this great big sheet. So I'm going to cut it down. The size that I used was 4 by 4, but you can use just about any size that you want. But I'm going to go ahead and use a 4 by 4 sheet. My paper is 12 by 9. So I know I can get quite a few pieces out of here. So I'm just going to mark my 4 inches. If you don't have a ruler, you can always fold the paper And I'm going to go ahead and try to cut these all at one time. So I'm using that 12-inch edge, dividing it into thirds at 4-inch increments. Now you may want to just cut your paper one sheet at a time. I'm going to cut all 4 of mine together. I'm holding them very tightly. No, you do not have to use colored paper. If you have colored paint, you can always start with a white background, or if you have paint, you can always paint your background any color you want. Again, if we look at this Warhol print right here, you can see the background looks like grass. You could use, if you start with white paper, you could always make a background that is sky blue or grass green or any color that you would have. Now, the thing, if you paint your background, you're definitely going to want to make sure that it's dry before on in the printing process. Okay, I have more than enough pieces here. So I'm just going to get started with each of these. And again, I mentioned I'm going to use a 4-inch square. So I'm going to go ahead and, so with the 4 colors that I have here, and I'm using 4 because in my print, I am going to focus on 4 backgrounds, different colors. There we go. So I have 2 sets of 4 here. All right, I'm just going to double check my celery stalk. Yeah, that fits on there nicely. I want 4 colors, so I have 4 lids. The lid is going to act as the surface that my paint is stored on, so I can press my celery in the paint so that I can print. I have some scratch paper here so that we can give it a trial run before I actually put it on my paper. So I think I'll do blue and red, green and yellow, red and pink, and orange and yellow. So now I know what colors I've already determined. So I know what colors I'm going to be using. So let's start with the yellow. Now, when I get this paint onto my little mini palette here, I'm going to spread that out a little bit. And you know what? I'm going to add just a little bit of white to this. I'm adding a little bit of white because I'm thinking on that orange paper, it's going to show up a lot better. I have my yellow paint. Now I'm going to kind of spread this around a little bit. This is acrylic paint. If you're working in acrylics or temperas, these paints do have a tendency to dry kind of fast. So if you get it too thin, it's going to dry, especially if you have a fan on. It's going to dry pretty fast. But we'll go with this. Now, as I mentioned, we could do it one of 2 ways. We can add the paint directly to our surface. Let's try that first. So I'm just going to paint this on a little bit. You don't have to be too concerned about it. And I'm also starting with my yellow because it's the lightest color that I have. And since I'm going to be reusing the celery stalk for my prints, I want to make sure that when I wipe it off, well, a little bit might get on there, but I won't have it on my yellow. Okay, so we have pretty good coverage throughout the whole celery stalk here. Not too thick, because I don't want it to just be a big old blob. I want you to be able to, I want the viewer to be able to see that there's a flower there. And just to get the hang of it, I'm going to take, I've got it comfortable in my hand, and I'm going to press it down on the surface. Okay, so that worked out pretty well. So let's try it again. I don't want to get it too heavy because I don't want it to just make a big blob. If you put your celery down on the surface and you just feel it sliding, you might have a little bit too much paint. So I'm just going to cross the surface of every celery piece. There we go. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead. If I was working on my paper, I would make sure it's centered. I want to try to set it down on the surface pretty much at the same time. I'm rocking it just ever so slightly because I want to make sure that all of the pieces have contact with the paper. And then I'm going to lift it up gently and voila. I have a monoprint. I'm going to use one of my orange squares this time. So I want to make sure that it's kind of lined up here. And I'm lifting it off carefully. I can feel it pulling a little bit. And voila. Oh yeah, I'm very happy with that. I have a little piece right here that maybe I missed the surface right there. I'm not going to worry about that. The beauty of a print is in the process. And that looks like a beautiful flower. I think we had success there. Okay, I mentioned there's two different ways we can do it. I kind of like applying the paint to the surface, but we'll just go ahead and see what happens. I'm spreading this paint out a little bit. Now I'm going to gently put my celery into the paint. I need to make sure that I cover everything. Now this is a little thicker. Okay, ready? We'll see how it goes. Set that aside. Let's give it a try. I'll just do it right here. Okay, it feels like that's a little bit more paint on there. So we'll see how this one turns out. I remembered, I'm going to try to get this outside too. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure that the celery and the paper have, oh wow. Okay, that one looks good too. I can see this is actually thick with paint. Now I like the way it looks, but I am absolutely going to have to be very careful. Can you see that there's actually a thickness? So I'm going to try that on my paper too. We'll see if we can duplicate that look. And then I need to just be really careful because that's going to take a little bit of time to dry. But let's try it. I'm going to move this one around. Oh yeah, I might have to cut that out of there later because that looks good. Okay, here I go again. It looks like I have good coverage. Line it up on my paper. I just want to be careful. Once I set it down, I do not move it side to side. Carefully set it down. I'm trying to put even pressure on it. And then I am going to go around to the edges to make sure that I have full contact. Okay, I'm putting my finger right on the side of the paper here. I have a clean spot here. So I can hold the paper down as I gently lift so I don't smear my print. Oh yeah, that looks good. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next color here. If I can get some of this yellow paint off, and I'm not going to be too concerned. Okay, it looks like I could use just a little bit more paint on here. So let's try this. Got it lined up. Okay, I got a firm press there. I'm going to hold my paper down. Oh yeah, Okay, that looks good. I see the tiniest bit of yellow coming through there, and I'm good with that. I think that adds a lot. So we'll try one more here of the red. All right, we have 2 red. Moving right along. I'm going to do the blue next and the green last. Now, if I was particular about the colors mixing, I might even rinse and dry this in between. But if you do that, the key is you want to get it dry. But for our purposes, I think that's good. Again, I think I'm going to add just a little bit of white to this because I'm working on red. I want that blue to show up. I think I'll do it each way this time. I'm going to dab my paint on first. Looks like I have good coverage here. Might as well do a practice just in case. Oh yeah, it looks like I needed to make sure I get some on this side. And I mentioned this is going to go on my red square. I already figured that out before I got going here. So while I'm in the process, I don't have to think, oh, what color am I going to do? So I'm going to make sure to set it aside so that it doesn't get smeared. Okay, so I am going to come back to the green in just a minute. I have some paper here that I can practice on. I'm going to show you quickly what I'm going to do with these, and I'm going to finish this then later because I'm going to show you those handprints. Okay, let's just go for it. So later I'm going to mount 4 of these. This will be green. So later I'll mount this. And remember, the yellow will have the green on it when I get them all done. Okay, I'm going to set that right here for right now. Okay, handprint. I happen to have some blue paint here. I'm going to try finger first, and then I'm going to dive into the fist. So let's just start with something small so we kind of get used to it. Okay, so just simple. But if I start, now I'm turning my paper because I want the petals to be about the same shape. And if I did it without turning my paper, the shape of the petal would change. Here, I noticed on that one, I got my nail on there. I'm going to try to avoid that. That works for a print. It's a very simple print, but it still works. And I happen to have some yellow paint here, so I could come back with my pinky and put a yellow center. Voila. So you still have your fingers. So we could do that. Okay, what's next? Let's see. Here we go. I have my fist. So I have this shape right here is what I'm going to try to go for. So I'm going to add the color here. Okay, I got some paint. My fist is kind of held tightly together, like I can feel my fingernails on my hand because I want to make sure that I don't smush it around too much. So I'm going to put it down nice and evenly, and I'm pressing with even pressure, trying to make sure I get the whole thing. Ooh. Okay, that's pretty interesting. Let's see here. What did I miss here? It looks like this right here didn't catch. No, that did. Oh, I know. It's this surface right here that didn't get full contact. Let's try it again. Now, the beauty of this is not so much in our shape as repeating the shape. So if I were to do this, like, let's say 4 times and mounted it. Okay, let's try again. All right, so I'm thinking that what I might want to do with my finger and just fill this in, finishing touch here, and there's some flowers with your fist. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me here at the Appleton today. Bye now.